So what is the significance of touch? Touch can boost our immune system. Touch can also help us feel calm in moments of stress. Touch can also deepen our relationships. Touch was our first language. We had this experience of touch even before birth by hearing our mother's heartbeat amplified by the amniotic fluid. In the early 20th century, babies who were orphaned to institutions, nearly 100% of them died. It wasn't until 1915 that when doctors put rules together saying that babies need to be carried throughout the day. Cuddling, caressing, caring, all became basic experiences that help babies to survive and thrive. Inuit and African babies, generally speaking, are much more calm than Western babies, and these babies are held constantly. These babies learn to communicate with their mothers through touch. A mother knows when her baby's hungry when her baby nuzzles or roots or suckles her skin. These babies are strapped to their mother's chests and backs throughout the entire day. And these cultures believe that, and this is so cool, that babies communicate through touch, not crying. Dr. Matthew Hertenstein, an associate professor of psychology at DePaul University, says, as adults, no matter what our relationship status is, we are not nearly touched as much as we require. And especially in our culture, compared to other cultures, our culture has made touch from someone other than a loved one taboo. So sad. Researchers are studying everything from hugs to high fives. In my work with the elderly, the sick, and the dying, touch at this stage of life is just as important as any other stage of life. Isolation, loneliness, depression, anxiety, pain can all be softened when touch from the heart is offered. Touch can also communicate, you matter. I see you, I care for you, and that you are loved. And sometimes, touch can be more powerful than words, especially in the presence of suffering. A few months ago, I met Mr. Smith, a 80-year-old retired cop who came to our hospice unit to give his wife a break from care. And the nurses said, Mr. Smith's a great guy, he's really nice, and he could use some integrative therapies. So I walked down the hallway, took a couple deep breaths, knocked on his door, and I heard a voice say, come in. And as I crossed the threshold, I noticed that the room was really quiet. No TV, no radio, and I could see the winter sun cascading through the metal shades. And there was Mr. Smith, sitting straight up in bed with a slight smile on his face. I sat down beside him, he answered my questions, and noted that despite his circumstances, and he was about 3 to 4 months from dying, that he just had a little pain in his hands and his arms. So I offered Mr. Smith Reiki, and I told him, as I'm going to tell all of you, that Reiki is a steady, light touch that most people find relaxing. And he said, well, I have nothing else to do, so go ahead. I began my work, and pretty soon Mr. Smith began to relax. His breath became a little bit easier, he closed his eyes, his jaw began to soften. And then he says to me this, you know, I loved being a cop, and I was really good at it. I was respected by my fellow officers, the people in my community. But I wasn't a very nice man. In fact, I was mean. I was very mean, especially to my wife and my sons. And now I sit here and I wonder, will I die alone? Who's going to come be with me? I don't want to die alone. And I could tell that this was the first time that he spoke these words out loud to another human being, let alone admit this to himself. It was raw and it was real. He was scared, and I don't blame him. Now, mind you, I'm not a chaplain, I'm not a social worker, I'm not a counselor. I'm an urban Zen integrative therapist. And one of my tools that I have in my toolkit is to bear witness. And for me, this means to be with whatever arises and give it space. Easier said than done. Part of me wanted to tell this man, well, you seem like a nice guy. I'm sure you won't die alone. Instead, I chose to feel my feet on the ground, watch my breath, and continue giving Reiki. And then I remembered something that my teacher, Roshi Joan Halifax, taught me, which is sometimes in the face of suffering, we feel that stillness and silence aren't enough. I continued giving Reiki. And then I thought of something else that Roshi taught me, which is this. Especially when sitting with a dying person, what words will benefit him? What words will benefit him? And I surmised none. And I continued giving Reiki. A few more uncomfortable minutes passed. And then something really interesting happened. He said, you know, I think there's just some things about my life that I will have to accept. Silence. He looked off into the distance and then back at me. And he said, or maybe there's just some things about my life I will never accept, and I'll have to be okay with that too. Now, mind you, Mr. Smith is not going to nuzzle into me, nor any of the other patients that I see. But his needs are the same as a baby's needs: to be cared for, to be loved, to be nurtured. So what are the benefits of mindful touch? Well, the skin is the body's largest organ. And when the skin's sensory receptors are stimulated, oxytocin is released. Oxytocin is the bonding and trust hormone. Oxytocin can give us a sense of feeling safe, feeling nurtured, feeling engaged, the feeling of being open and trusting. It also reduces cortisol levels. Is this what happened to Mr. Smith? Perhaps. And what about my fellow coworkers? How does mindful touch benefit the other people on the unit? A relaxed and calm patient helps the workflow go much easier on the unit. A broken workflow creates stress and strain for everybody on the entire unit, including other patients. And what about the family caregiver? How does the family caregiver benefit from mindful touch? Well, for them, it's a sense of relief. They're seeing that their loved one is being supported beyond their basic daily needs. So, Mr. Smith, you might be wondering, well, why was Mr. Smith able to confess his biggest fears to me? It could have been, it just happened to be me. It really could have been anybody, but it happened to be me in this case. And what about Mrs. Smith? After 50 years of marriage, couldn't she provide mindful touch to her husband in this moment? And here's the thing that myself or another medical professional can provide: touch, mindful touch with no judgment. Naturally, a wife, after 50 years of marriage, has judgment to fix, judgment to love, judgment to end, judgment to prolong, especially in a dying person situation. What we have discovered is that mindful touch without judgment nor expectation to fix can create a sense of deep relaxation, giving the dying person the opportunity to make peace with their life or just feel loved. Thank you.